Good morning and welcome to the 2019 OSTA Annual Conference. This is our 58th annual conference for our organization, and we're so glad that you all are here to learn and grow with us. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Okhee Lee. We have had such enormous support for Okhee that we are also live streaming this keynote, and we'll be recording it and putting it on our OSTA members only section of our website. I heard Okhee Lee speak at the 2017 NSTA National Congress on Science when I was the president-elect of this organization 2 years ago, and her message was one that I thought needed to be heard by not just science educators, but all educators. And in fact, what I heard from her inspired our theme for the conference, All for Science and Science for All. And I'm getting emotional because I think her message is so great. And I hope that it resonates with all of you as much as it has with me.
Oh, thank you, Jill. Oh, wow. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here. Now, we are a little bit late. That means I have to cut out some of the funniest jokes that you are going to miss them. But too bad, I know. It's making things work, technology. I'm in the company of friends and colleagues, and I would like to start with a family member, adopted brother, Corey Buxton, at Oregon State. And then, hi, Corey. Okay. So my stake is very high, not only with all my colleagues and friends here, but also I have a family member who will tell all my family members about what I'm doing and how I'm doing. Okay, I'm really very excited to be here for a couple of reasons. One is that I consider Oregon always as a very progressive. So I'm testing out some of the ideas with you, and if you say thumbs up, those ideas will go nationally. If you say thumbs down, I will kill them. So. Okay, that's one. Just because the theme of the conference, I'm going to use science as the NGSS instructional shifts as the theme of my presentation. So here we go. People who are doing streaming, because it's going to be recorded, again, I'm going to be less funny because I don't want it to be recorded that way. Okay. STEM education for all students, including English learners, and I include English learners, but the ideas really apply to all students, including English learners, but not English learners only. I would like to make that very clear. Here is the overview of the presentation. There are 4 topics today. And I would like to start with, so here is, think of it as a unit, and we are doing the storyline of my presentation. And we are going to build a more coherent understanding where the ideas become more complicated. So if you miss one chapter, then you're going to have a little problem, so follow me, okay? I hope that I'm speaking English instead of a Korean throughout the day. Overview of the presentation. I just would like to say about where we are in terms of adoption or adaptation of framework of the NGSS, and I consider that as a State of the Union part. Where are we starting from 2011 of the framework that got published in 2012? That's based on the research literature, which gives us a strong foundation of a research-based practice. Then came the NGSS of 2013, and my pride is being a member of the NGSS and being the leader of the NGSS Diversity and Equity team, where I had the opportunities and honors of working with my team members, 6 of them representing diverse student groups. And okay, that work was done. I think of the science standards as a bit of a relay race. So it started from the research foundation that got translated into the framework. That's about the research part. Science standards are policy initiative. The baton went to policy. Now, let's see who has the baton right now, going to the finish line. Adoption and adaptation, I see that you are really serious because it just became so quiet. I'll speak quietly. When it got 5 states adopting, 10 states adopting, I was thinking we had the room to fail. And that got 20, 30, and right now it's 44 states in DC. 50 shades of a gray, different levels of adaptation. I hope you smiled at that. It's in the morning? Okay. But 44 states, and we simply cannot afford to fail. So far we had gotten so far. Here is the real task of doing the work in the education system. And that's where the relay is right now. The baton is in your hands to go to the finish line. We typically give the baton to the strongest runner, and that's you. And it's especially the case because we don't have many instructional materials or the assessment instruments, and we are trying to make it work at the national level while we are creating things. So that's the baton. Another very important thing about science education right now is that traditionally there was a little bit of antagonism and mistrust of people who do research. You do your own research in your own ivory tower, and then policy people coming from the State Department of Education saying that these are going to be tested, and the practitioners are saying it doesn't make any sense because my kids don't get it. Right now, the real positive thing about science education is that we are speaking the same language where we all try to figure out. So there is a research, policy, and practice all going together using the same language. So we say all standards, all students, and we think of instructional shifts, but I really think of it as a flipping, and that's my English as a second language in plain English. So what does it look like? Traditionally, scientists and teachers say that this is what is important, and those are things that scientists and science teachers think are important to get written in textbooks. And that's where the literacy plays the bully, because it's written in the books. Then knowledge of science disciplines go down to the students, and some smart kids in science get it. Most other students do not get it. It doesn't make any sense at all. I'm doing it because I'm told to do, and many of the students who don't get it are the traditionally marginalized students. This time, we are flipping it completely upside down. Now it's all students, and I will say why all students? It's because when the NGSS were released in 2013, that was the year when the minority became the majority in terms of the numbers. Here is a joke. Before 2013, when we were talking about equity, I really did it. I said that equity is because it's the morally right thing to do. Now that the minority are the majority, it's a social security depends on our students. Simple as that. Okay. Be nice to your students, they will support you. Okay. And they are the all students. Now all students are trying to figure out not what is given to them, but they are making sense of phenomena and design solutions to problems. I also make the difference between knowledge of the science disciplines as a science and then design solutions to problems. This time engineering is along with the science. So figuring out and making things work are the same. Then students are making sense of phenomena because they are the scientists and engineers. This flipping has been really hard to figure out because we are changing the system completely. The philosophy, the assessments, the instruction, the materials, all of it. So when people say that I can do this and I can do that, I would say that chances are that you are going to traditionally, have you checked, have you thought about, have you considered completely the opposite way of doing? Chances are. Okay. Flipping upside down. Now that the standards are different, then approaches to reimagine language should be also different because the standards are different. When we say language, it's not just the language for English learners, but language for students with a limited literacy, language students speaking different dialects, students who struggle with, and every student, because language is a part of any communication. So what does it mean? Here is from the English learners in STEM subjects, the document that came out in 2018, and it'll say, then and now, traditional and contemporary. So traditionally, we thought of a vocabulary as the precursors of prerequisites, and we pre-teach and front-load vocabulary. Poor Okhee, who just came from Korea, she does not speak English, and we have to give the vocabulary. And I'm thinking, I don't speak English, and I'm getting more vocabulary that I don't know, and I'm really scared. Although I could be brilliant in science, that you do not know that. That's the flip side. Okay. Instead, a language is a product of doing science. Another contemporary compared to traditional. We think of a vocabulary as the disciplinary language. It's because of vocabulary comprehension have been such a foundation of a literacy, and we follow the literacy frame of a vocabulary as the language, as the foundation of reading comprehension. Instead, when you think about asking questions, argue from evidence, constructing explanations, develop models, they are all forms of a language. Pointing out here, gestures, even liking of the smile, they are all means of a communication. So language is way beyond the vocabulary. Okay. I can communicate any ideas without actually using vocabulary. We used to have a separate content objectives and language objectives. So today I'm doing molecules, and then I'm doing past tense as two separate objectives. Now, instead, the contemporary thinking is that it is a contemporary, it's a part of a language. So what does that mean? When I do the investigation, I'm doing it now. So what tense do I use? Present. I'm writing a report that I did. What tense do I use? I use a past tense. I'm making a prediction of what will happen. What tense do I use? Future tense. It's just so embedded. Okay. The last one that I think is the most important is this. That poor Okhee, who does not speak English. So I simplify language for my student Okhee. And by simplifying language, we actually simplify content. So we have two sets of standards. And I find it really interesting that we always say academically rigorous content standards, text complexity, persevere, rigorous. And then we simplify it and we make it easier as if we have two sets of standards, one for rigor, the other for simplification. Do you get it? Level the readers, simplification, all of those are poor something rather than, wow, Okhee must have something very valuable. You don't know what I have. Okay. I think the philosophy is that we always think of in a deficit, so-and-so who does not have a language, does not have a culture, so I'm giving it to you, rather than so-and-so may have a language other than, culture other than. So one example of a deficit and asset that we were doing is that, Corey, at the committee meeting, remember that we said that we always say support English learners and even possibly protect English learners while we challenge students, everyone else. Why don't we use the support and challenge English learners, just like any other student? That one example really gave me the hint of a deficit of I'm supporting her versus I'm challenging her. Asset. Am I speaking English so far? All right. Then contemporary views, science used to be individuals, learners, master science content. Contemporary views, students make sense of phenomena and design solutions in engineering work and knowledge. Language, the same traditional views, learning vocabulary and grammar. Now we are using language to do something in science, learning science. I'm going to include a computational thinking. All right? So here is the phenomenon that we are trying to figure out. How do we do the convergence of a broadening participation of diverse student groups? By making STEM and computer science disciplines accessible to all students using technological innovations of artificial intelligence, robotics, all of those. At the same time, convergence, that's the phenomenon. We do not know what our students will face in the future when they grow up, so they should be ready. The driving question for us is take a seat at the table to make it work. So we are going to come back to this driving question of are we ready to take a seat and then make it work for the students? The second part, science instructional shifts. I'm going to move fast, okay. Science instructional shifts. We all know 3 instructional shifts of explaining phenomena or designing solutions. by engaging in, I can make one sentence out of these three instructional shifts. Students are explaining phenomena or design solutions to problems by engaging in three-dimensional learning, and over the course of instruction, they build a coherent understanding through learning progressions coherently. That's it. Simple as that. And I'm not going to go in detail because you are all advanced in Oregon. Oregon is one of the early adopters, so you should be familiar. Why phenomena matter? Because it's about the science instruction is the goal students to make sense of, and it gives opportunities and purpose for all students to engage in. So what is the answer? All of the above. That's why phenomena really matter, and I will say more. Three-dimensional learning, I don't have to go through. There are 3 dimensions and 3 colors. That's that. If I have to go through that, I'm in the wrong place. I just said Oregon is a progressive. Okay. Coherent learning progressions over the course of a unit, and this is a Brian Reiser's, and I first thought that this is a beautiful graphic. This is a model. One thing that I have become really humble is that any model has a meaning in every single component of the model. So I sat down one day, and Brian, we had a really beautiful picture model. And what are you trying to say? He says that there is a phenomenon, which leads to a question, and students are engaging practices, and there are hexagon, there are 8, and the color is blue. What does it mean? Science engineering practices, 8 of them. That's what he's trying to say. Figuring things out, there is a orange color and green color. That means what? Orange is, come on. Orange is DCI, green is cross-cutting concept. Thank you for coming along, that's good. From L community. Okay, and then now that has, then it leads to the next question and goes to the next one. So he has on the top, there is an ocean, there is something about natural phenomenon, and there is a beaker. So students are doing some sort of investigation in the classroom, that's what they're doing. There is a meaning to something that simple. Susan, it's interesting, isn't it? That's what he's trying to say, yeah. That's why I'm so picky about my PowerPoint presentation, because every word, every color, every component has a meaning that I'm very intentional about. I drive my colleagues crazy. All right, now that's a unit, but there is a learning progressions over the course of the K through 12. So make observations to construct evidence. There is a grade 1, grade 4, middle school, and high school. So this is really an interesting one example. First grade students just need to know that light enables us to see. Fourth grade students say light is reflected to my eye, and that's how I see. And the middle school gets more complicated. By the high school, it says something about the light you can explain by using the electric radiation through a wave model, a particle model, from grade 1 to high school. That's how complicated it becomes. From we need a light to see to wave and particle model. And if we miss something in the middle, then kids miss, because it's a building and it's a coherently developed. So that's all about the science standards. Okay. What time do I end? Just to know. The session is 10. All right, I'll slow down then. The second one we are really getting to, now that we know the science instructional shifts, we are getting science and language for all students, including English learners, all students, classroom video. So I would like to invite you to a classroom. This is a good friend of ours in Portland. I informed her that I am going to make you the star, and she knows it, but she may not be here. So this is, you will see why this is you, Oregon. Classroom video, okay. This is really an amazing instruction done about 2014 or several years ago. The video shows a 4th grade student's science class at Title I school with 64 economically disadvantaged and about 1/3 of L's. When I first saw the video, I told Jen that, Jen, it would have been really nice if you have some L's. And she said, okay, I'm so disappointed that you would say that, because 1/3 of my students were L's. And this is about the March. Okay. about 6 months into the school year. The teacher has been making instructional shifts for the past couple of years, and this was her 3rd year when the videographer from the school district videotaped. Curriculum, when I show this video at a place, one very advanced person said, "Oh, that's a FAS unit. There is nothing special about the unit." The teacher just made it phenomenon that is meaningful to the students in a local context. Because she was hiking and she was very curious about this phenomenon. In a sense, she wanted to figure out why. So she gave the tasks for her students to figure out for her. The school district produced the video, and we wrote about the article. Not we. Haas is my doctoral student. Witten is the teacher. The 3rd author is the district coordinator, and it has been coming attraction in Science and Children by NSTA for quite some time. So it's real. I'm just so proud of the team of the authors. Okay. 2 or 3 week unit. Performance expectation is a 4th grade. Make observations and measurements to provide the evidence. What is that? Practice, core idea, or cross-cutting concept. Practice, of course. The effect of, that is what? Cross-cutting concept, effect of weathering or the rate of erosion by water ice, so that's a TCI. Phenomenon is the landscape is found along the coast of the state of Oregon and neighboring state Washington, so it's EU. The driving question was, how was the landscape formed? As big as that. Now here comes your task right now. And I'm actually going to make you work. And there are microphones. As you watch the video, think about how the teacher demonstrates the NGSS instructional shifts. Remember the 3? Making sense of phenomenon by engaging in 3-dimensional learning and understanding builds coherently over the course of the unit. Explain a phenomenon, 3 dimensions, and discuss with your partner. We'll get back to that. While you watch the video, also think about how the science instructional shifts promote language use and development with all students. And if you have English learners in your classroom, including English learners, and discuss with your partner. Now again, because you are so advanced and progressive, I'm giving you 2 sets of tasks at the same time. Science instructional shifts and language use. If you're beginners, according to the progression, I would do science instructional shifts first and then see the video again and think about language. But you are doing 2 tasks in 1. Language use in science learning. So how does a phenomenon-based science instruction support language learning? How does a 3D learning support language learning? How does a 3D learning support language learning over time, coherently, about 2 to 3 weeks? Now, you will see that throughout the next about an hour, you are going to come along with the learning progressions. So this episode or the segment is a unit of 2 to 3 weeks with a 1 performance expectation. The next segment will be a 9-week unit covering 5 performance expectations. All right? That's the learning progressions. I'm really following the spirit of the NGSS. So here we go. Ready? Please take out a piece of paper and pen, and you are going to jot down what you see of 3-dimensional learning, especially find all the science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts, and also think about language use as you see the science and instructional. Now, again, let me just say, the video was done by one of you in Oregon 5 years ago, and that's how inspirational it is. And you can say, if she can do that, I can do that too, of course.
Let's review the rules when we are having a science discussion. What are some of our agreements?
We know when to talk when nobody else is talking.
What about if you notice that somebody isn't sharing?
You can work together to try to share and solve your problem.
You bring them into the party.
You bring them into the science party, into the science discussion, exactly. The one thing that we worked on last week was where we had our Legos. What do those Legos represent?
Legos represent building on each other's idea.
Okay, so remember today as we start getting into our science discussion here that we're building on each other's ideas. So what we learned about and what we've talked about the past couple of days is what might increase the rate of erosion. This was a model for a river, and when we increased the angle a little bit, can somebody explain what the water flow was like?
The water kept going faster, like when it was 10 degrees, it took 4 seconds, but when it was 55 degrees, it took 1 second.
The erosion forced it to go faster.
So that's a great place to start our claim. We think that increasing the angle of the stream table will increase the rate of erosion.
It left us with a lot of canyons plus the delta, which made it pretty interesting.
Let's see if we can see Christian's group up on the screen to see the rate of erosion with theirs. So we're looking for that increased rate of erosion. I mean, look at that. What is that even in 20 seconds? In 12 seconds it went through. Okay. How do we think this connects to our phenomenon and the mysterious landscape? My name's Jennifer Witten, and I teach 4th grade at Beaver Acres Elementary. And what you saw today was the end of about a 2 or 3 week unit where our class has been working on a phenomenon. Started the unit showing them some pictures of a landscape in eastern Washington. It didn't explain how the land was formed. So what the students did after watching that was they created their own model of what their thinking was about how this landscape was formed.
This project is about discovering what created those weird holes. When we did our experiment, maybe do you remember when the water started falling? It made a hole on the sand. Maybe it made a huge hole on the sand and made those black holes.
Oh my god! It's creating the delta.
That's okay.
Oh, there's another one.
I think there was a little hole and the water started coming in, and then it created more cracks because the water was coming in, and it created more holes and more, and it created bigger, which created a canyon, and that relates to our stream table.
Those holes are from those rocks, and then the water moved those rocks to a different area, and then made multiple.
What do you think, Kashmir?
I go with Nicholas's idea.
Experiment 1, which most represents the landform.
I think it would be experiment number 3, because number 3 added more water, and it was like more efficient. Maybe there was more water than less water. We pulled up the old video to see which one was more efficient, and I think it was number 3 because there was like a little delta and the whole thing almost collapsed.
This process started with watching a video of the landscape in eastern Oregon, and Mrs. Witten asked us what caused it, and what we thought was the waterfall. And then we did a few experiments to figure out what caused the landscape, and now we are making a model of what we think happened.
I'm just gonna give groups about 1 more minute, and then we're gonna have a board meeting. We're gonna meet and present our ideas, okay?
We used to think that a drought dried the ocean up and a volcano caused the soot and ash. Now we think that a flood caused the canyon and carried the boulders to random places, and the water pressure caused the holes. And the stream table experiment supports our idea because when the water hit the land, it made a canyon and caused erosion.
Any questions for this group?
Is there still a volcano in this or no?
No.
How did the bits of rocks make the ash?
The water chipped away bits of rock.
Today what you saw was this board meeting where they revised their thinking. They had to include all the ideas from the activities that we did, and tomorrow we will watch the entire video and they will be able to see if what their theory validates what really did scar this landscape. This is part of some practices that have come with the next generation science standards. What I've been most excited about with these standards is the role that language plays in science, and I find that these standards really align well with language development. As you saw today, the students have a lot of time to share their thinking, their reasoning, they're using evidence to support their thinking, and then they're explaining their ideas and changing their thinking. All of those are science practices, but they're improving their language through learning new content. And as you can see, it's really engaging. Students are 100% engaged, and they're really doing some incredible work in here, I think.
I would like to ask you to organize your thinking and speak with your partner for about a minute to see what science and engineering practices you see during that 5-minute video. Capture as many practices that you can think of, and I would like to ask you to stand up and share what practices that you saw in the video. Go. Okay. Okay, we are going to come back. We have microphones over there, one, and how many do we have? So we are going to do some rapid succession of responses. We do know that ask questions and define problems, that seems really obvious. Develop and use models seems to be pretty obvious, right? Okay. Microphone ready? Anyone? Okay. Plan and carry out investigations. Who would say? Where do you see the plan and carry out an investigation in the video?
Yeah, that was an easy one, really. They were doing it throughout the video. I don't know if they got a field trip, but they were definitely doing a lab simulation where they had the water in the tubs and doing some geoscience there.
Excellent. They did 3 investigations to figure out how the landscape was formed. Thank you. That was an easy one. Okay, let's see. Analyze and interpret data. Analyze and interpret data. Anyone who would volunteer to share? There is something very unique about analyze and interpret the data that okay. Kevin, okay.
So they were talking about the data that they collected, and then they were deciding which one was the best, which one was, and then they were talking about it. I mean, that's the big point there, is that not only were they looking at their data, they were talking about their data and deciding which one was better, and using their evidence and going back to their videos and going back to what they had formulated on their papers.
I like your ideas. You're looking, you're doing the observations and collecting data, but they are also talking. You just said that science and language go together. You just said it. You just did. Okay. I'm just holding you accountable that you said it. And then you said evidence and reasoning, all of those, right? To make sense of. Excellent. Kevin, you have something to say?
I like the way they use data. I have kind of a broad view of data. So their data was this video, and it had a few tags to it, the time and things, but they were just looking and pointing at that video. And to me, that constitutes data. It's different. We usually think of a data table or a graph or something, but this is just as good.
Original data source. Yeah. See, this is what is really unique about opening up for discussion. I never thought about that. Thank you, Kevin. Okay. Anyone else that I would like to see? Here is a teacher talk. Anyone else there who would like to add about analyzing the data? Okay. Barbara.
Well, so I especially like that the teacher didn't say in the beginning, this is the right solution. Let's watch the movie from the beginning to the end. She left it really open, and that made it possible that all the ideas could happen. And with trial and error, the groups figured out what is their solution.
Okay, opening up for the ideas. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Moving on to, I think it might be something, use mathematics and analyzing data using mathematics. Anyone who would like to share about the video of what from there, analyzing and into using mathematics? Any comment?
So I noticed at one point one of the students was saying that they had added more water, and he was curious if that had had an effect on their outcome with their experiment as well.
How is it mathematics?
More.
More? Okay. Qualitative, yeah, qualitative. There is a qualitative mathematics, but who can add a quantitative mathematical data? There is a hand.
When they were discussing the angles of the slope as well as the speed of the erosion.
What did students say?
They were comparing, I believe there was a 55-degree angle was the second one, and I can't remember the first degree. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Collaboration. And comparing the speeds between the two.
See, so there is a qualitative data of higher, lower, but the quantitative data of exactly how much higher and lower, right? Okay, that's a precise idea. By using precise data, which becomes a precise language. Neat, isn't it? Really neat. I mean, just neat. Okay. And then there is a teacher said 20 seconds. Oh no, 12 seconds. It's important because it's important to be precise. All right, excellent. Okay, computational thinking we are going to leave at the end. Construct explanations and design solutions for engineering. Who would say something about the construct explanations? Anyone? From the video. What is the explanation of how the landscape was formed?
So I think this is where the students are really bringing the language in. So they're taking all of this data, they're looking at their analysis, and then they're bringing in what they know about the phenomenon and what they know about the science to make meaning of that data that they have collected.
So what was their explanation based on all the data?
Their explanation varied depending on the group, but they're looking at the water running down, at moving the boulders, at leaving it where, dropping it off where that made sense with their models, and using kind of what they had done in order to be able to bring that in.
Multiple factors they're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Erosion, the amount of water, all of those, the multiple factors, yeah? Causing that landscape. Okay, explanation. Now, it is an explanation for the phenomenon. So how are they making the connection from the investigation data using that evidence to explain the whole thing about how the landscape was formed? Explaining from the investigations to explaining the phenomenon. Anyone who would like to say about it? There.
Well, there was the one boy that was talking about the boulders rolling, and then he was using that to perhaps explain what was happening in the video.
Okay. Thank you. We will get there. That's a coming attraction, so thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Okay. Now, number 7 is engage in argument from evidence. Where do you see the evidence of engaging in argument from evidence? In the video. Yes, here. Run. Morning exercise.
What I really liked was the two kids arguing over no. I think this one was the more effective, and that was the more, and this back and forth and how they did that was really, I like that one.
Okay, that was arguing between the two boys. And do you remember what a boy did for the group? Don't go, the microphone. They showed the video, but also.
And then they talked and they reflected back on their data.
And then he also invited a girl.
He invited the girl to participate and the other members of the team. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Inclusive. Everyone had something to say. Okay. Obtain, evaluate, communicate information. A lot of those communicating, obtaining. So here is the last question about the DCI explaining. So they got all the data from the 3 investigations, and they argued and construct. But eventually they wanted to figure out the phenomenon of the landscape, how the landscape was formed. Remember that at the end of the video, the teacher said that tomorrow we are going to come together to explain the theory of the landscape of the east coast of Oregon and Washington. That's a huge thing. Actually, what it turned out to be is that there was a theory, rebel geologists who would say that the catastrophe actually causes the change of the landscape, different from the millions of years of erosion and weathering. And he was a rebel. Students came up with the same theory that if that amount of water can cause the delta and move the boulder, why not? Why not? So that's how scabulons were formed, and that's a theory. And the kids came with the same theory. And I was thinking about the scale. Why not? The huge amount of it could change the landscape. Well, we have a Big Bang theory changed the whole universe. Right? Yeah, that's a scale. So kids were so proud that they came up with the idea based on 3 investigations. All right, here we go to the next one, cross-cutting concepts. Bless you. There are 7 of them, and I'm going to ask you to go back with your partner and think about the cross-cutting concepts that you saw in the video for 1 minute. Go. Okay. We are going to come back. All right. Ready to run. Patterns. What is the evidence in the video to show patterns?
At the end, when they're comparing everybody's answers, eventually you're going to start seeing the pattern of the steeper or the higher flow rate, the more it carved out. And you're going to see that repeated over and over and over again. And so you start to make these connections that this is something to expect. The steeper it goes, the faster it flows.
Okay. Pattern actually tends to lead to explanation. What is causing that pattern? So pattern is very important, not only seeing the pattern, but what is causing. Okay, thank you. That's the landscape, how the landscape is formed based on the patterns. Next one, cause and effect. I think someone will say that's easy. All right, what is the cause and effect of cross-cutting concept in the video? Cause and effect?
Hi, I think the cause and effect would be less water, less erosion, more water, more erosion.
All about multiple causes that they're testing. Okay, angle, amount, all of those. 3 investigations are designed for that. Scale, proportion, and quantity.
So thinking between the small scale of the sort of, model in the classroom and then blowing that out to the monstrous scale of the actual landscape.
Small to large scale. Excellent. Anyone else who would like to add about the scale, proportion, and quantity? That's a scale, proportion and quantity. Proportion. You could think of the more, there we go. There is.
We discussed about how the angles would affect how much came off. So then you could change that and control for how much stuff you would expect to see from the erosion based on the angles.
Excellent. Proportion based on the quantity of things. Thank you. All right. Systems and system models.
Thanks for being close together.
This really ties in. It flows really well from 3. They've got that scale model system, and they got the real system too, and they probably have taken a look at that real system. If not for real, they've seen video of it at least, and they modeled that system. And that model is super important. If you get the model wrong, then all your evidence is it's going to be worthless. So
I cannot say better. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, energy and matter. It's a little bit complicated. Energy and matter at the elementary is not as emphasized, so you couldn't. It's not as obvious. So I'm going to skip. Structure and function. Okay, try.
Just to add to as a chemist, I'm always thinking about structure and function of molecules. But in geoscience, if they don't get that system model right and the structure and function of that system model, then their model's not going to be useful. So they got to really think about the structure and function of the dirt that they have in that bucket. The dirt doesn't work right; it's not going to work right.
Yeah, it's a stretch. Yeah. Okay. And stability and change. Stability and change. Erosion and weathering might take 1 million, but catastrophe may take a couple of minutes. So let's go back. How many practices does that 5-minute video address? All of them. How many cross-cutting concepts does the 5-minute video address? Many of them. To explain why. Is it beautiful? My undergraduate students, when they analyzed the video, were just like, wow, I can do that, all of them, in 2-week instruction. Beautiful. This is what I mean, that the baton is with the practitioners to implement it and see whether it works or not. Because the standards are pigments of imagination of what could be possible. You are testing it whether it is possible. Okay. So science instructional shift. By the way, thank you so much for your comments and participation. Wonderful responses and thinking and reasoning. Okay. So it's shift 1, explaining a phenomenon, designing solutions. We try to focus on local context where students have the experiences. What is funny is that the video is about the scabulons in Washington, but the girl thought that it's the scabulons in Oregon. Yeah? Okay. 3-dimensional learning, science and language practices are language intensive, but you said that they are observing and they are talking. It's as if, where do you see it? It's right here, so close. Okay. Then as language becomes, so they are using delta and the model and diagram. Are they using those terms in a meaningful manner, sophisticated? Yeah. They are not using those terms simply because they are terms, but they are using them because they are important to use. And they have gotten only 6 months after the school started. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 investigations over time. Now language use, let's think about language use. How does a phenomenon-based science instruction support language learning and 3D learning and 3D learning supporting over time? That's a phenomenon and 3D and then coherence. So I'm going to just put all of them together, and I would like to ask any of you to say phenomenon-based science promotes language learning. 3D and 3D promotes a coherent understanding. Microphone. So anyone who would like to share how you see the 3-dimensional learning and phenomenon are promoting language use and development.
Thanks. So it's good to see you again, Okhee, by the way.
Good to see you.
It's been too long. So one of the things that I notice about when I'm instructing with students is that over time, for instance, with the cross-cutting concepts, when I first tried to introduce those to the students, I tried to introduce all 7 at once. And that was a big mistake. You know, you're talking about the progression of learning. What I saw with students is over time, as I kind of tooled that back and said, we're going to look at one at a time, then they could look at multiple ones later. And so the way I like how it talks about support language learning, I find my students become metacognitive of their own thinking through the process of phenomenon-based science. And over time, they become more sophisticated in their own minds because they're analyzing their own thinking and their own processes. And to me, that's when you get a student who can look at their own thinking, it becomes very powerful for the student.
Thinking about their own thinking. Mm-hmm. So that is a coming attraction to moving to the next section. Ready? All right, so thank you, Jen Whitten. The video, the teacher in the video. So here is a phenomenon-based, because it's something that students experience, and it's very compelling to figure out that I wanted to find out why. And then doing science is using language, because it's almost like you cannot do science without using language or some modes of communication. And then now you have the reason to use a language to communicate and become more sophisticated in both the science and language. So we are going to move on to the learning progression of a second. Now, some of you who were attended the webinar, you might have heard me saying, so this might be the second time or third time, so bear with me because I would like to move on to the next one. This is a learning progression component. So here is a 9-week instructional unit covering multiple performance expectations, and it's specifically on language and science integration. 5th grade science curriculum is about phenomena, so what happens to garbage, and why did the tiger salamanders disappear? That's about ecosystem. You could have said, what happens to pythons with alligators in Everglades? Why does it matter if I drink tap water or bottled water as a part of earth science? And then why do falling stars fall? And by this time, we are playing with the words. So you can see fall, what does it remind you of? Fall, gravity, okay? That's a blending in space science with the physical science. Falling stars, they are meteors, but they're not really falling stars. So we are playing with the stars, real stars and fake stars, and why do they fall? So we are playing with the words a little bit. We became a bit daring at this point. Garbage unit, we got the design badge after trying many times, so we are very proud of it. My job is to make a garbage shine. And it's on the Achieve website, so very proud of it. Purpose of a sale is that students are engaging practices over the course of the year. And we have been working very closely with the teacher advisory board who really provided us with the feedback of how. So this is not just imagination. We have been testing the unit for 3 years in the real classrooms through multiple iterations. Students are doing garbage and they cannot stay, and the garbage cannot stay in the room because it'll stink. So they have to make something. And here is a model. So the garbage from the cafeteria garbage is a model of the landfill. And then what we affectionately call landfill bottles of the open system and closed system is a model of the garbage from the school cafeteria. By saying open and closed, what am I saying in terms of cross-cutting concept? Open system, closed system. Okay, when you look at the part inside, there are orange slices and banana peels, and then there are aluminum foil and plastic. Spoon, what do we see? Patterns of food and non-food. So without ever using any words, students are starting from the beginning of the school year of patterns, properties, system. We also do home garbage, school garbage, and neighborhood garbage, and they all go to a landfill, and it's a garbage system. And the garbage system has subsystems of home, community, and neighborhood. You do input, process happens, and output is stinking smell. And then you explain why. So all those are very intentionally positioned in a very design-minded, so that kids are doing it without ever thinking about it until they say, wow, that's what we have done. That's what's really amazing about the way that we are doing science. So phenomenon. We think of a phenomenon in local context because everybody has the experience of garbage. Our school and home community makes large amounts of garbage every day. We cannot leave the garbage in the room. So they are doing the garbage, what happens to our garbage, and that's a driving board, question board. They are figuring out. So you can see, how many clusters do you think we have in the unit? By looking at the Post-its. Class 4. Okay, students think that they are doing the clusters of questions, but we sort of like intentionally guide them. The unit has how many clusters? 4 clusters. And 4 clusters address how many performance expectations? About 4 or 5. Blended, but okay. So local phenomena, why is it important? Because it's a part of equity. It's a place-based. It's a garbage. Okay. Creating relevance. Students have a funds of knowledge. Students have a language experiences, and they all come from in science. So it's about the design. 3-dimensional learning. So they are doing what happens to the garbage, and they are doing, okay. And here is a coherence of a storyline, build a science understanding over the course. There are 4 clusters. And here is a full cluster of, there is garbage. We cannot leave the garbage in the room, so we are making 2 landfill bottles. And then at some point it really opens and stinks, but the waste stays the same. Even the banana peels and orange slices have disappeared. Oh, that's a mystery. How can it be possible? And then they are doing decomposition by microbes, and that gets into ecosystem, which is another performance expectation. Okay, microbes. All right, so here is the modalities. Let's think about language. Am I using linguistic modality right now? Okay? Am I using visual modality right now? Uh-huh. Am I using everyday language? Of course, when I joke. Okay. Am I using specialized language? Absolutely. I don't use inquiry. I use science and engineering practices according to the framework document, but not the inquiry, which is the national science education standards of the previous generation. So I try to be very precise. Interaction. I'm talking to one-to-many. And it's great to see everybody, but I'm talking to everybody. So I have to be very explicit of, I cannot say eat that. I have to say very precisely, explicitly of what. So here is the garbage example of how do we smell garbage. That's a particle nature of matter. I'm going to briefly go through, and then I would like to get to the end. So here we go. Keep it for a while. After 3 weeks, you open the closed system. And what is the smell? Right. Now, we are not teaching sentence frames and sentence structures or word wall. We are using language to explain why. First, when we say draw how you smell garbage, so you don't think that it's a cloud that is floating. Seriously. And then they say that, oh, smell is like lines. It's moving toward me. And the colors really mean something. They are not simply beautiful. Red means smell, and blue means air. So there are two different substances. Later, after investigations, they learned that air is made of a particle, smell particle, and it's moving by using arrow, which is a symbol. And then eventually they learned that like that. So students are using text, talk, diagrams, symbols in a sophisticated manner, very strategically, from very simple to articulate. Right. Modality. You may say, okay, you're making up. Here is the students that say the lines are the smell. Do you see that? It's real. I didn't make up. In the cafeteria, pizza smell. After 2 weeks, here is a closed system. So you see that banana is what? Yellow. Orange is red. Okay, arrows mean movement. So it's what? Smell is made of particles, orange particles, banana particles, and they move. And they are not continuous line. They are made up of particles. So that it becomes, we tend to think of a multimodality across the subjects in a different way. ELA thinks of a multimodality in terms of only thinking of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. ELA Common Core do not give a credit to drawings, diagrams, coding, programming. It's really literacy-based. They are still bullies. Okay. Come to science, and there are a whole lot more than reading, writing, speaking, and listening. English language education goes one step further. That poor Okhee who does not speak draw or point or label when all my peers are arguing from evidence because I don't speak English. So we tend to equate the not speaking English as lacking cognitive ability. You have two sets of science standards that are intended for all students on one hand, but poor Okhee, she does not speak English, so therefore she's sitting in the back and she draws and points and label. That's the way it's, okay. Science education views a multimodality as a multiple. So science people think of a multimodality. L education and ELA think of reading, writing, speaking, and listening linguistic modalities, and we have to put the two together so that there are multiple modalities. Thank you for nodding. Okay. It's breaking the silos that we have been doing traditionally. Registers. So here is a smell. It says, yikes, it stinks. Below the nose, that's a communication. Smiling, that's also a communication of an emotion of enjoying it. I'm really excited to do the science. What's wrong with that, right? Okay. If it stinks, what is it? Is it smell something or nothing? It's a something. If it's a something, what is it? Is it solid? No. Liquid? No. What is it? Possibly gas. So smell is a gas. If it's a gas, why can't we see it? So through the investigations that they learn that gas is made of particles that are too small to see. If a gas is made of particles, too small to see. How do we smell it? First, it was like a cloud that is floating, and then the lines that are moving, and then there are particles that make up. Now you say that smell is a gas made of particles that are too small to see, moving freely in space. In 2 weeks, it's real. From everyday to specialized language, and it becomes sophisticated. And here is an example from the 5th grade student. So he says, smell travels freely, and the wind helps it get more spread out. You cannot see smell because its particles are too small to see. Does the student have an understanding? Thank you, resoundingly. Now the students have an understanding what would be the next step if you push further, work on language. Science teachers tend to stop here. I know what you mean. Let's move on. Language teachers start from language and say, you learn vocabulary and we stop here. No, kids have an understanding and we need to push to be Sunday best language. We need to work together. It's the beginning of it. Great, but not enough. Okay. Traditionally, we think of precursor, prerequisite, because I don't speak English. Contemporary thinking, I do all of those and I have a reason to figure out why garbage happens and what is that smell. It's a product of doing it. This is really very important. We don't do pre-teaching and precursor. No, language is learned as a product of doing it. Okay. If nothing else, if you get it, that's it. Interactions. We use the language in different ways. So if it is a one-to-one, you say, I don't see it here in it because I know what you're talking about, that the reference is right there. I don't need to say very sophisticated. But if you're doing large group, you cannot say it, that. You have to say it is garbage. That is smell. You just have to be very explicit. This is what happens when you write. Remember that you always say, what do you mean by it? What do you mean by they? Because students are not explicit, as if I'm talking and using talking in writing. That's explicit, because streaming people, I hope that I'm speaking very explicitly so that you can understand me, because they are invisible right now. Traditionally, we think of, do you remember the word that starts with a P, P, P? And kids say, I don't know what you're thinking. No, P, particles will come at some point, but not tomorrow. Introduce it, use it, and it'll come. So don't force the students to use. So here is a beautiful, I hope. This is my model. Have I had a little bit more time, I would ask you to think about, can you explain my model of a science and language being integrated? My model. Just imagine, so just give you 3 seconds of my model of how I see my research team. Think of how language and science are interrelated. So you can imagine that science goes through, starting from phenomenon and making sense of. Then students are using language to explain, to communicate for functional purposes. So they use modalities in multiple ways. They use registers from ew, it stinks, to smell is made of particles. At some point, the students will have to use particles because they cannot keep saying, those little things are too small to see. I mean, you just cannot keep saying that for the rest of it. So we just call it what? Particles. Are we cool? Cool. Then we move on to molecules in middle school, and atoms, and subatomic. So at some point, that everyday language has to go into specialized language because you're moving up. But it's using language when there is an understanding. So there is a register and interactions separately. So we are going to the next one, and I have just about right time. Are you with me so far? Whew. Okay, learning progression. The last one, computational thinking, with all students, including English learners. And this is what keeps me busy and thinking. So we are working with the MIT, who own the domain, and Vanderbilt, people who do the computational thinking as research. So you can see that in the beginning, I even did not know how to turn on the computer. I still have a difficulty. But it is multiple disciplines are coming together where people contribute. Okay. Here's a combining the science sale with the computational thinking and modeling. By the way, the reason I am sharing is because remember that I said in the beginning, Oregon is a progressive and you are progressive educators. And if you say thumbs up, it'll go through nationally. If you say thumbs down, I have to rethink. So you are my test case. Ready? Okay. We haven't done the presentation yet. So here is a Star Logo Nova. That is a NetLogo family. And just giving you a snippet, a taste of. So Star Logo Nova, those who are familiar, you may say it's agent-based. I'm giving the command for my agent to do my command. Agent, it could be Robert, it could be something, it's an agent. My agent, it sounds like my agent, PR team, coaching agent. I'm giving the command. And it's a block-based programming, I will say more. And then it's making sense of the explaining why. Here is a programming. I consider that gibberish. I will never do the job like that, programming. That's someone else. But I would like to know something that is more meaningful. So here is block-based. Think of a scratch. So there is English here. Set my color red, forward, right by 90 degrees. So it's not programming, it's a block. Programming language is combined into blocks that is everyday language. Kids can understand everyday and color, toggled. Okay, I can buy that, it's a scratch. Models in the garbage unit starts with a physical model and diagrammic model. And we are getting into a computational model. Are you following me so far? All right, it's coming. So here is on the bottom, you see on the bottom, that's the command. I'm giving the command for my agent to do the work. It's almost like you are talking to your computer, do this, do that. Kids are doing the same thing, do this, turn 90 degrees. I'm telling you, oops, it doesn't follow my command. There's something wrong with me. So kids are actually talking to the computer. The agent, okay. So here is a computational model to explain decomposition caused by. Because the kids know, the students know from the garbage unit that they know that microbes are causing decomposition of banana peels and orange slices. But they cannot explain because they cannot see microbes. Do you see that? Too small to see. That's where the computational model comes in. Too small to see, too big to see, too complex to manipulate, too long it takes. Okay, computational model to do the modeling. So here, you see the microbe, right? Microbe is my agent. So I'm telling my microbes, whether there are 5 microbes or 10 microbes or 20 microbes. So when microbes are in contact with, the language is a collide. That's the computer language, but in contact. The banana solid, what? Changes to banana gas, which is a smell. That's it. I know. That's it. I give a command to microbes, which is my agent. And banana solid turns to banana gas, which is smell. So weight stays the same because students will say, of course they are there. It just simply changes. So total weight is 500 units. Solid is 423. Smell is 77. And how do they know? Because from their landfill bottle investigation, they saw that weight stayed the same. There is a really physical, actual data. And if the weight does not come together as 500, students will say, oops, there is something wrong. I did it wrong. I need to go back. They do reprogramming. It's not hypothetical, it's real, because they have the data from measuring the weight. Okay. So here is where we are going. Do you see that? Language use, computational thinking, in service of science and engineering, with all students, including English learners. So right now we are putting science and engineering in the center and language and computational thinking in service of, for the functional use, for all students, including English learners. So we said that I'm using linguistic modality, visual. Now we are doing agent. Microbe is my agent. We are using simply different terms, but guess what? They're the same. Thank you for smiling. It's a modeling. Whether you're drawing, or you're doing physical, or you're diagrammic, or computational, it's just a different forms of models. The second one, register. Blocks-based. I don't know how to do the programming, but I know how to do right, left, 90 degrees, toggle. I know how, that's English words. That's a block. And then interactions. I'm not only speaking to Susan and Jessica, but I'm talking to the computer. Microbes, do this, do that. I'm talking to you, and I'm redoing. So we're trying to figure out this phenomenon. All right, we are getting back to the anchoring phenomenon of this presentation. Broadening participation of all students, including English learners. STEM, science and engineering, including mathematics and using technology and thinking like a computer, computational thinking, and using technological innovations of the design style logo Nova. And how do you combine in a way that students, it reflects the lives of the students, because the students are learning what? Math, the science, engineering, technology. And we adults tend to be isolated. We do science, we do language, we do math. And I cannot imagine how crazy it is for the students to get all the things and saying, it doesn't make sense. That's what I'm pushing. That break the silos. It sounds like Reagan's tear down the wall, Mr. Gorbachev. Seriously. Okay. So that we take a seat at the table that represents the realities of your teaching, but especially your students who are getting all the different subject areas. These are the references, and we don't have time. I am 1 minute away, and I blame in the beginning. I'm kidding, but thank you for the technology making it work. So thank you so much. And I'm really very honored to be back with the friends and colleagues and my little brother, younger brother. So thank you so much. I'll be around at the conference. Enjoy the conference. Okay.